Welcome back to Around the Table with Stacy Smith as we take a look at the election yesterday and what happened in Allegheny County, and perhaps also what happened with the Democratic Party. I can't say so much about the Republican Party because they did come out for both candidates who are on the Republican side, but the Democrats basically kind of split their tickets. Joe Mystic has already said in this program that he thinks this was kind of sort of a rejection of the progressive ideals. So, Jim, as a former state party chairman, where do you think the Democratic Party stands in Allegheny County right now? You had a progressive win for county executive, but you had a progressive lose for district attorney.
We've talked about this in the prior segments, but I think it was a pushback on the progressive movement. They've been successful in the spring with their messaging, and more often than not in primaries where moderate candidates were divided and there were more than one on the ballot. So they've been able to get through and they've been successful, and their ground game has been good as well. They were truly tested last night. And sometimes, I speak as a chairman, I speak like a coach. And sometimes you say things that a victor or somebody who loses does not want to hear. But three things, in my opinion, saved that race last night for Sarah. The ground game, and we talked about that, and I spoke about that in prior segments. The ground game, the messaging that we talked about, and the shadow of Donald Trump. The moderates in this county stepped up. And I think the moderates in this county are consistent with a moderate view in our party across the Commonwealth. 4 judges, Democrats, won statewide last night. So moderation is the key. The Democratic Party in Allegheny County needs to have a conversation about looking for more moderate candidates, because we saw last night how close the GOP came to winning that seat. And I suspect that the GOP now sees a model in this county to be successful again, looking for moderate candidates on issues such as public safety. If the Democratic Party in Allegheny County continues to put progressives up, and progressives who do not want to hear about diversity or who don't want to share a diversity of ideas, extreme progressives, and there is a difference. Extreme progressives getting on the ballot in the spring are going to have a harder time getting elected or being successful in the fall. And we talked about this last week. Party needs to have a conversation on that. I don't think the party is divided here, but I think the progressives need to see the writing on the wall that we have to all work together and all govern together and find the right candidates that can win against an energized Allegheny County GOP moving forward.
Well, before the governor or Joe talk, I just want to make a little bit of pushback on that. If I'm a progressive, I'm going to tell you that I've got Summer Lee in office. I've got Ed Gainey in office. I've got John Fetterman in office, Chris DeLuzio. And so I lose one race, and I now have Innamorato. And I would think if I'm a progressive, I'm in control.
Stacey, I would think that the big loser in last night's election was probably Mayor Ed Gainey. And if he and Summer Lee don't hear footsteps, they're not listening.
Each of those progressives has a different story to tell. Chris DeLuzio is a progressive, but my God, military guy, Naval Academy.
I don't think you can include him in that group, Jim,
you cannot. You cannot. He's a pragmatic progressive who works with everybody. If you want to run a progressive for office in the spring, use the template of Connor Lamb, use the template of Congressman Chris DeLuzio. And you will find progressives who will not only do well in the spring, but they will do very well in the fall. Pragmatic progressivism, that is the way. And what we're seeing in some of these other races are progressives who are not pragmatic. And Mr. Gainey does have a big problem here. And I wouldn't be surprised if, as the conversation turns, you're right, Professor, they need to pay very close attention, because I know conversations will probably begin to be had about a moderate path to victory in the spring. They have to start looking over their shoulders for different reasons. Mayor in particular, the inept failure of public safety right outside that window.
Stacy, let me add this, because we're talking about the progressives, the far left. We also have the far right. And a lot of that is induced by the reason that still today in Pennsylvania, we have our primaries that are closed. You can only vote as a Republican. You can only vote as a Democrat. If you're not registered in those parties, you can't vote. A lot of people have moved from those two parties and they've gone to become independents. And that's where I think a lot of the moderates in the county and in the country are located, in that area. And I have encouraged the Senate leadership over in Harrisburg, you have to consider opening up the primaries so that An independent 1 year can come in and say, I want to vote in the Democrat primary because I want to help select somebody there. Or next year they come in and say they want to vote in the Republican primary. Many states are open primaries, and I think it would bring us back more to the center and not have extreme candidates out there that are winning and getting in, that make it difficult for us to move forward with compromise and working together. And that's the only way this state and this county is going to move forward.
All right, you guys have already indicated how you think Steve Zappala is going to be in building a coalition around himself, and possibly even if he needs to take on the mayor of the city of Pittsburgh over certain issues. What about Sarah Innamorato as county executive? Give me your thoughts on how you think that's going to be, especially with a relationship with county council.
Well, now she has to govern. This is not an exciting job. I think it's fair to say. This is a grinded out everyday kind of job. She's dealing with the most basic issues in our society. The county is, of course, the provider of social services throughout our county. This is just plain old, put your head down, go straight ahead, hard work. And that's what she has ahead of her. It's not really a showcase for flamboyance or for big ideas necessarily. The first thing you have to do is get the job done, get services into people's hands, and then maybe the voters will reward you with a little bit of flexibility so you can try out some of your ideas.
Governing is very difficult because you had to be building coalitions of people who don't necessarily get along to get something done. With county council, I think there's probably, and Jim, you could address this better than me, there's some factions in there, even though the vast majority are Democrats, but you can't be pleasing everybody all the time. And she's going to be in a position coming here very soon as to who to say yes to and who to say no to. And that could be people that both supported her at one period of time. And she's going to have to manage a budget that's over $3 billion. Who she picks as the secretary, what I would call him secretary of the budget, is going to be very important to where she is going to be able to go, where the county is going to be able to go. And I think she's going to be under a microscope from now well into the mid of her first term.
Sarah, after the primary, had an obligation to build coalitions, to use your words, ahead of what was expected to be a victory. And I would submit respectfully to Sarah and the party that the coalitions were not built. If the coalitions had been built, that would have contributed to the race being a wider margin than it was, and Mr. Rocky may not have been able to gain any momentum whatsoever. Sarah did not do the coalition building that she needed to do, and she's fortunate to have won. I respectfully submit. Sarah doesn't have a choice now. Sarah must build coalitions in order to govern a county as diverse as this, a county as bigger than 4 or 5 states. She must, as a leader, and I truly believe she has the gifts to do this. The question is, will she choose to use those gifts to build that coalition? That coalition has to be a team of individuals that don't necessarily think like her, that may not necessarily have the same political ideology, may not have been on the same side in the spring, or may never be on the same side. And all of us here, the 3 of us, have at some point in our careers held executive office. You have to have a team around you of people that are brilliant, and you have to have the security in your own intellect and the security in your leadership skills to get people around you to advise you that are smarter than you on occasion, or whenever needed. If you find folks that are some of the best, the brightest, and the brilliant, get them on your team. And significantly, don't get a bunch of yes men or women or sycophants around you to tell you what you want to hear, what they think you want to hear. Get some folks that are going to step up and say, are you out of your mind? You can't do that. Why would you want to do something like that? And then have the confidence in your leadership and your own intellect to trust it. Sarah needs to do those things to be successful.
All right, we need to take a break. We'll be back in just a moment.